Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us this afternoon and giving us your time. It's not easy to get some time out of your day. I really hope you get some good value out of what we're presenting today. I'm really excited. I'm a propeller head by nature, love my tech, and I love my AI even more. What we're hoping to try and do today is to give you some practical applications of AI. There's a lot of AI everywhere out in the market. There's a lot of noise. What makes sense for me? What makes sense for our business? How do we get an ROI out of this thing called AI and automation? And it's becoming an interesting part of the discussion and the journey of how AI makes sense for any business. It's interesting being the marketing director now at Corp IT and seeing how my role is affected by AI. I've been using it very heavily for the last 2 years, and in fact, 80 to 90% of my day now is spent in an AI tool of some kind. I really don't think I could do my role anywhere near as effectively as I do today without AI. So I really hope you get something out of it. I really hope something resonates. Should be a good journey. We're very grateful and privileged today to have Aidan Clifford join us. Thank you for coming on board, Aidan. Aidan is the manager of Microsoft Alliances APAC at our wonderful partner, Pax8. He's got a wealth of knowledge when it comes to the Microsoft stack and the Microsoft application layer. Thanks for joining us, Aidan, and over to you to take us on our AI journey. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks very much, Darren and Glenn, for having me back, and pleasure to see everyone on the call today. So I really appreciate everyone taking the time. As Darren mentioned, my name's Aidan, manager of Microsoft Alliances for Pax8 here in APAC. I've been working with the Microsoft ecosystem for about, I think going on about 12 years now, and working directly with Copilot for about 3, as luckily through the relationship with Pax8 and Microsoft, have had access through the early adoption program, through all the versions of Copilot, from those early days through to where it is today. Very happy to share the latest versions of Copilot, which I'll be walking through some of the practical use cases of. We've seen some dramatic improvements to the product over the past few months, and starting to adopt some of the more modern use cases that you may be seeing through some of the terms like Claude and co-work out in the marketplace today. So really expanding how you can start to utilize AI. But really for the session today, I really want to focus in on how do we make it practical? Some of the things that I've noticed through doing sessions like this, speaking to IT partners every day, speaking to their customers every day, is the market is moving so quickly. There are some power users out there, but there's a lot of people who are starting to get left behind, who haven't started adopting AI. They don't know where to start. So we want to start getting some runs on the board for everyone, raising that baseline within your business, because really the only way to get that true impact for our businesses, particularly with an SMB here in Australia, is to make sure that everyone in the company is on the same page, understands how to get those advantages, and then can turn into tomorrow's power users and really start to get the most out of your investment in AI. But as the title suggests on the screen there are some real risks to consider as well, and some real reasons to start collaborating with businesses like Corp IT around Copilot readiness, AI readiness, and compliance standards that may be relevant to your industries as well. But it is a bit of a frontier. We don't know what, you may not know what you don't know if you haven't delved into this ecosystem before. So we wanted to start having a bit of a chat around that and how you can start to get the ball rolling. So as far as a bit of agenda today, I just want to talk a bit about the AI transformation opportunity, particularly through the lens of why we're talking about it from the Copilot side of things. You would have heard 1,000 different brand names over the past few years, from ChatGPT through to Gemini, through to Claude, through to Grok, even if you're a fan of the Twitter bot. But there's a whole bunch of different options out there, even DeepSeek, which is starting to re-emerge and become more popular. And there's a whole bunch of services that can start to be aligned to this, and you want to know which one's the right one for you, because it's some of them, the best ones for your compliance do come at a cost, but that cost should be able to return a very quick and over-indexed ROI with a few easy steps. So that's where I want to start looking at why we're talking about the Copilot lens, particularly in a business and enterprise sense, but then start to look through how we can make it as practical as possible through basically the lens through prompting, which is just utilizing your natural language to integrate with your AI solution, and in order to get the right response back is really crucial to making sure that A, you have to do less work, but then B, you're getting an impactful outcome sooner than later. I'll also then stop sharing the slides after that and start to work through some practical demos that I've set up through my M365 environment as well. And then we'll also have time for questions at the end, but I really do encourage either using the chat or the Q&A throughout the session today. Please do ask any questions. This is your time. I want to make sure that it's as valuable for you guys as well, and getting any answers that we can clarify anything along the way to make sure we can all leave the session today with some practical steps on how to utilize AI more effectively. So as I was mentioning a moment ago, there are quite a few options out there in the AI ecosystem. Some are starting to pop up. We're hearing a lot about Claude. We're hearing a lot about Perplexity, but we're also hearing a lot about Copilot and its advancements as well. So where we start to talk about Copilot, and whilst I am in a Microsoft role, so I may be a little bit biased, there are quite a few advantages to utilizing the Microsoft technology in a business sense in particular versus if you're using privately on your own device at home. Firstly, you're getting access to the same large language models as you'd be getting access to through some of the other paid subscriptions out there. So thinking the OpenAI models through ChatGPT, also the Claude models as well, which are now within the Copilot ecosystem and starting to launch into general into GA shortly. So you're able to access the same level of technology through the free versions and the paid versions of Copilot. Where it starts to become really distinct, though, is it's going to be accessing, if you're on Microsoft 365 or connected into one of your data sets, it's able to read through your data natively within Copilot itself. So rather than taking your data through to an external AI solution, you're able to activate this AI solution on top of your data where it already resides, which is really crucial when you start to think about your own security, defending from external threats, and also internal compliance, who has access to the right amount of information and when, and how can you implement some really practical controls around that. So if you're thinking about sort of some risk scenarios of if someone on the front desk is able to access any of the HR information within the company or able to access any of the financial information in the company, which they shouldn't have access to, historically, some of these files were sort of hidden through obscurity within your filing system. So people would have to click around all day in order to see what they could find access to. If the right compliance levels to the right labeling isn't implemented in your organization, this can create a risk where those users are able to use AI in order to tap into that a lot faster and a lot more easily than previously. So whilst there's a huge amount of use cases we'll go through the session today, there are some of these considerations, which is a great case study to have a chat to Corp IT about how they can get you on your way to that compliant and secure usage as well. Beyond this, if you're thinking about, well, me personally, as long as I've been a student, which is going back some time, or been in the workforce as well, chances are I've been using the Microsoft 365 apps throughout that sort of past 25, 30 years as well. So I've been utilizing Outlook, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, you name it, all these kind of standard apps that we're used to. Copilot is tying directly into these applications as well, and it's bringing some of these more advanced models where we've seen a huge advance over the past 6 months as far as getting to an end state or a final draft before you can submit things like final PowerPoint presentations or doing manipulation in Excel sheets as well. So this muscle memory starts to really add up. If we think about the underlying technology, going pound for pound with some of the solutions out there, it's already tied into your data, already tied into security and compliance as has been set up in your environment, and then is already tying into the Microsoft 365 apps that you and your workforce already know how to use. That adoption curve is a lot lower than if you're starting to use an additional external application, additional external solutions, and that training cost can really start to add up as far as cash and time as well. And then finally, I think it goes without saying a little bit, this does tie directly into the internet as well. So you can access these solutions through the World Wide Web, so utilizing for things like research, augmenting your internal data and documents as well, and utilizing some of the research capabilities within Copilot to really make a really rich experience for you and your team. I just touched on it a little bit earlier, but when the conversation starts to sort of extend, I won't go too much into agents today, but I really just wanted to introduce them to the conversation partially just because this is where a lot of the advancements start to go. Once we have our foundation on how to utilize AI in your business, and we're starting to look at the security and governance of your information across your M365 apps, we start to think about how can we remove bottlenecks? How can we start to make sure there's more efficiency within your environment as well? And this is when we start to think about things like agents. Where I start to think about agents is my experience with Copilot. That's me discussing it directly in a one-to-one relationship with my AI there. Agents is more of a repeatable controlled parameter application where you're able to say, like, I'm going to create an invoice for a customer. We're going to do 50 of those each month. How do we make sure that we've got a really robust process to put in the information we need to create a really consistent outcome at the end of this? Start to do that around things like onboarding for new staff, do that thing around service tickets. There's a whole bunch of different repeatable operations where you can start to introduce agents to do that little bit more pre-work, but make sure you can have a really seamless, repeatable operation post that as well. But what is most important around this, which I mentioned a little bit earlier, this all comes under the Microsoft Security and Governance Framework. So if you're utilizing Microsoft 365 and starting to use licenses like Business Premium, E3 or E5, there's a lot of security and governance included in those licenses, which can set you up for success on how you use your data, how you store your data, and how you can access what applications and what individuals are able to access it as well. So there's a pretty rich set of tools that if you work with Corp IT, they'll be able to set you up for success there as well. But this is just the beginning of the story. I don't want to overwhelm on the call today, but I just wanted to let you know that within the Microsoft AI landscape, there's really a whole plethora of options as far as how you can start to take this AI conversation from today and extend it into parts of your business to make sure that this investment has a continued ROI and continued opportunity to increase the efficiency and productivity within your organization. So today I'll be largely talking about the experience within Microsoft 365 on the left-hand side of the screen. But then when we start to think about repeatable or custom agents that you can start to introduce to this conversation, there is also some tooling through Copilot Studio, which doesn't require a huge amount of development work like it would have done a few years ago. There's actually ways that you can speak directly to build out agents yourself, just using natural language or using very low code scenarios in order to build those really rich agents out as well. But if you've got a sales tooling in the background there, you've got CRM, you've got ERP, enterprise resourcing planning tools, as everyone does. AI is starting to tie into the Dynamics 365 ecosystem as well. So if you're using a different product today, or you're using Dynamics and not tapping into some of the AI functionality, this is where the web of that Microsoft solution really starts to pay off, and you can get efficiencies all the way from a Teams meeting through to how it's integrating with your ERP and your CRM systems as well. So there are a lot of opportunities to dig into, but it's a big old conversation, so I'll leave those ones for potentially a follow-up session later on as well. But really where I want to make sure that this session is as practical as possible is let's start to look at things like prompting and some scenarios where we can get our thought processes going, and then start to look at the demos as to how we can start building these out as well. So really where I like to start is fundamentally, what are the right ingredients for prompts, as Microsoft has called them, or what are the pillars that we want to make sure we have within our prompts to create a really controlled, predictable, and impactful output from Copilot when we start to put our prompts in. So this guidance is pretty evergreen, realistically, and when you start to stack it together, I think it starts to speak as to how effective it can be. Let's start to think about what the goal of what we want to have from our interaction with Copilot. So the goal in this instance is please generate 3 to 5 bullet points. So no matter what comes after this in this prompt, unless it's contradictory, we'll generate 3 to 5 bullet points from the remainder of this prompt. How do we start to make it more meaningful? Then let's start to add some context into what we want that output to look like. So 3 to 5 bullet points to prepare me for a meeting with a certain client to do with a particular brand campaign. So this is where it's starting to speak directly into the information in your M365 data, so you can start fishing around for these keywords and starting to put together through that large language model what those bullet points start to look like. Where it starts to become even more meaningful is adding additional parameters around the type of data to look for and any of the timestamps to make it more relevant to that output as well. So focus on email and Teams chats since June. This is where we start to limit that down so Copilot knows exactly where to look to speed up that response, but also to make sure that output is going to be more meaningful for you as well. And then finally, something which can be sort of left off at the end, but I think it's particularly meaningful, is to start to put those expectations. So in this case, use simple language so I can get up to speed quickly. But if you're thinking about putting something together for like an RFP or putting something together for a board report or a really high value client, this is when you start to say, use formal language for an executive audience, or start to put in additional qualifiers to make sure it's starting to look more like what you would like that end product to look like. So you don't have to do as much manual adjustments towards the end there as well. So that can make a really big difference as to the output you get from Copilot. So if we start to think about these prompts, let's start to think about some of the ways that we're working with Microsoft 365 Copilot, or then looking towards how Agent starts to fit into the picture as well. So in Copilot, we're utilizing these prompts within our M365 data and apps. We're working within the context of our meetings, our documents, our emails. So we're starting to think about all of the data that's flying around from our day-to-day usage as workers. We can bring these things together. We can synthesize multiple pieces of data in order to consolidate what that output would look like. So say, for example, summarizing today's meeting, also summarizing a quarterly report to do with a certain client. How do I bring this together into a single report or a single PowerPoint presentation? These sort of things, which could take a long time if we're doing that manually by ourselves. It does this by helping to sort of start writing, drafting, summarizing, analyzing, which is really strong now. And now through the addition of CoWork, which I'll talk about in a few moments, it's adding productivity tasks to the end of this as well. So we don't necessarily need to say, start summarizing this document, and then I copy and paste it and email it through to Glenn or Darren today. I can add that into the prompt, and Cowork is able to execute that additional step for me, which I'll show a little bit later on, which is a huge time saver because you can then be that more management position, start to put the additional steps through there. If there's additional inputs, you can clarify those, but you're really getting the ball rolling, and you can get a lot of the heavy lifting, including the execution, through to AI as well. But in this instance, it is user-driven. So something that you're asking for Copilot to do. Whereas if we start to look at agents, we're starting to see a lot more customization. You can augment this through additional data. So you can bring through connectors where data may sit within, say, like Salesforce or external CRMs and things like this. But you're really starting to automate workflows, automating repeatable tasks, and making sure that there's really strong parameters as to how those tasks are completed to reduce any risk of differentiation across like a sales team or an operations team as well, because it's looking at what is the goal that we're looking to deliver, what's the final product that we're looking to do, and you're able to prescribe that a lot more consistently through an agent experience. So where things are starting to get really interesting is one of the criticisms of Copilot over the past couple of years is that it was hedging all of its bets on OpenAI. So it's really kind of line in line with being the more business and enterprise focused version of ChatGPT, utilizing those OpenAI models. But a couple of months ago, Microsoft announced that it is now a multi-model platform. So it is now integrating through Anthropic the Claude models, which have become extremely popular. There are things like Claude Cowork, Claude Coding, and these bits and pieces which really start to increase the amount of execution that Copilot is able to do versus more the summarizing, the writing, the analyzing, these sort of bits and pieces. So this is really really exciting. I've had a chance to play around with this for the past couple of months. And so when we go through the demo, I'll show you what I mean. Hopefully showing by doing as far as the power of where this can bring this experience really closely together. So once again, I won't spend too long here as we'll jump into the platform in a second to show you this one. But really where I start to think about Cowork, if you haven't played around with this through Claude previously, it's really delegating real work. So thinking about things of asking for that traditional AI output, but then say book into a time next week where both Glenn, Darren and I are all free for 30 minutes. As long as we've got access to the data and access to those calendars, Cowork will go through and figure that out. It'll get access to that approval layer and start to book these meetings in for us. Similar for setting Teams meetings, similar for scheduling it in. If this meeting happened the same time every week, I'd say at 12:30 every Tuesday, summarize my meeting with Darren and Glenn and send through a report or an update with the table of action items and these sort of bits and pieces. So it really starts to reduce down the amount of times I need to hit my keyboard in order to get an output there, which is really exciting. Once again, this ties into the Microsoft security and compliance framework as well. So it really makes sure that even though you're getting this really impactful and expanding AI sort of ecosystem, it is always coming back to that enterprise grade security as part of the Microsoft 365 licensing as well. But where do I start? It's the question that I always get when we start to have a chat about these things. Oh, sorry, Glenn, I might pause there if you've got any questions.
No, it's gonna. Thank you, Aidan. I just thought I would actually go to everybody else before we go too much further, mate, just to see if anyone has any questions thus far with what Aidan has presented here or anything that you'd like to see as part of the demo. Just like to throw it out there to see if anyone has anything that they would like or have. Not yet, Aidan. Over to you, mate.
No worries. And if there are any questions, please do put them through. I know we try and balance covering as much ground as possible in these sessions versus trying to make it as impactful. So please do put through anything if you want to have want me to clarify anything along the way. Awesome. And Ryan, we'll get to that demo in a few moments. So we'll just jump through this. Where do I start? Just a couple of scenarios around where we can start to utilize Copilot. I will share these slides with the team afterwards, so we can share these out so you can go through any of the relevant departments, because Microsoft has actually done a really good job as far as the content of where do you start to get those creative juices flowing. I think that was where I struggled the most with Copilot when it was first given to me at work. Was just like, where do I start here? It's kind of like walking into a gym for the first time without knowing what any of the machines do, and then what do you do if you don't get any runs on the board? You end up walking back out the door and then maybe coming back for a New Year's resolution 12 months later and repeating the cycle again. So I want to make sure that people start to have these resources in order to start getting some wins, starting to see some time saved in their day. And as we go through the demo, I'll show you some of the ones that have been giving me the most value day to day. But this does start to introduce a bit of a adoption and change management scenario, which can be new to a lot of us. It was definitely new to me before I started utilizing Copilot. But one of the things that really helped me focus on where I can start to integrate AI into my day is what are the pain points of my role. So as Darren was mentioning at the start, I do have an APAC wide role. So people within my team start on firstly New Zealand time and they don't wrap up their day until Southeast Asia end of day time. So between sort of 7 a.m. 7 p.m. Australian time, my team personally is online. Then we're collaborating with the States over in the UK. So pretty much 24/7, someone at Pax8 might be pinging me with an email or inviting me to a meeting I may not be able to attend. So always running what Microsoft calls a digital debt, which when you're playing catch up in the morning can start to delay things of creating new projects, doing new content for the team, creating presentations for sessions like today, or when the eye of finance starts to come down asking for things like forecasting and these sort of bits and pieces. We're looking at evenings, looking at weekends. We're starting to get a bit overwhelmed around the amount of work that's coming through the door. So let's have a look at how Copilot can help. If we remind ourselves about the prompt ingredients or the key pillars that I was mentioning from earlier on, let's have a look at how we can start to attack these case studies or these use cases within my day. So how did Copilot help me initially? Recapping meetings. It's one of the most valuable ways that you can start to add value through your AI investment straight away. If we think about all of the people on the call today, all of our hourly rates put together, you can see that that's a huge amount of investment for each of our companies. And if we can start to utilize AI to summarize that, capture the productivity from that call, capture all the questions and the use cases and the tasks after that, and get it through to a meaningful action item and accountability afterwards, then that's a huge value gain back to the business as well. Other things like capturing emails that I haven't responded to, if I haven't managed my inbox particularly well and I haven't left my flags on or left things unread, Copilot's there to really stop things from falling through the cracks, which is really handy. And then a few things, I won't go through these in depth, but we will share the slides out. Think about just some of these drafting from existing documents, analysing and visualising spreadsheets for board reports, these sort of things. In addition to just formatting spreadsheets, I'll show you a few tips and tricks around formatting Excel sheets in a few moments' time, which as not an advanced Excel user has been saved me a lot of time over the past year or so as well. And we'll see how Copilot can actually create some pretty snazzy PowerPoint presentations where if you tried it a couple of years ago, maybe we're a little bit underwhelmed, but happy to say things have changed for the better since then. And lastly, we will look at co-work. So we'll see how we can start to execute these multi-stage workflows versus approaching these steps individually as well. I might just skip through that one. I think I'll leave this one in. We'll save this for another time. We'll get across to the demo, because really what I want to do is showcase how we can start to do this practically. But then we can have a bit of a discussion at the end as to what are some of the essentials for setting up Copilot for success. And it's really about building a community and power users within your organization, but exchanging notes in addition to making sure that your security and compliance is on point. So definitely something to have a chat to Glenn, Darren, and the team about as well. I'll just be one moment there, and I'll just bring up my M365 environment. I'll just be 1 second. I'll bring that across so we can start the demo. But if there's any questions, or Darren or Glenn, if there's anything you want to touch on in the meantime, I'll just be probably just 1 minute to load that up.
Thank you, Aidan. I just had one quick question for our audience. How many of you actually have a Microsoft Copilot license currently? Tim, yeah, thank you. Ryan? Yeah, it's interesting, and one of the things that we probably haven't touched on thus far to this point is that, as Aidan mentioned earlier, the amount of actual AI tools that are out there at the moment is just immense and continuing to evolve. It seems that Claude has taken a little bit, I guess, the front runner when it comes to its capabilities and things. That's the reason why Microsoft has decided to grab some of its Anthropic with how it actually works, as Aidan touched on. One of the things we can talk to at the right time now, isn't it? But the reason for Microsoft Copilot within your own tenancy of your organization from a security sense is extremely important, just to make sure data is staying within your environment. So that's one thing to obviously be very mindful of as well when choosing particular AI tools themselves. But I'll hand back over to you, Aidan. Thanks, team.
Yeah, no, great point. Thanks for raising that one, Glenn. I think it's the old adage of when social media was on the rise, it's if you're not paying for something, then generally your data is the product that the company's relying on. So generally that is the same rule that applies to any AI platform. If you're not paying for it, they're not going to be guaranteeing that that data is secure. That's where Microsoft, through the free version of Copilot, which is happy to say it is protected by the same commercial data compliance and protections as the paid version. So at the very least, in a work scenario, please make sure if you're putting any PII into your prompting, use the free version of Copilot just to make sure that that doesn't end up on the on the World Wide Web, as unfortunately we've seen, particularly through ChatGPT over the years, quite a few leaks which have impacted a lot of local Australian businesses and sole traders. So do be mindful of that one if you are utilising the free versions of the product. But today I'll be looking a bit more around the paid version. Unfortunately, I've had to look at this thumbnail for a little bit, which isn't the flashiest capture of myself or Bo from the Pax8 team. But what I really wanted to start was the Humble Teams meeting. This is where a lot of the ideas within companies start. We spend an awful lot of time on Teams meetings, so we want to make sure that time is well spent. But what I did is I conscripted Bo one day. I wrote up a script with Copilot around a fictional not-for-profit we created for the afternoon, where I think I was the general manager and the finance manager, Bo was sales and marketing. And we wanted to just have a bit of a chat around where our business was falling short, what were our strengths, but what were our opportunities as well. So I just wanted to show what is captured by Copilot in Teams, just from me not doing anything, and then seeing how we can augment that or improve it to get to the next stage of productivity even faster utilizing Copilot too. So we can start to see we've got the unflattering thumbnail, so we can watch the recording if we need to, see a bit of a breakdown of how the meeting is structured and who spoke when, and then we can start to see some of these meeting notes, which they're not too bad. They have been created automatically by Teams, but you can start to see some of the key areas that it is sort of noted that are crucial to that meeting with some of the follow-up tasks. So it does a pretty good job, I think, but let's see if we can improve that one for us here. And where we would start to do that is go to the Copilot option up in the top right-hand corner. So this is where we start to work just more manually with the transcript and the recording, which is captured through Teams. So you do need to make sure that you do record or at least transcript these meetings to utilize Copilot there. We do have some options for some pre-canned prompts from Microsoft, which generally align to the most popular ones. They do adjust these over time from some of the telemetry they see on the back end. But let's start to see how we can start to transform this into a way we can use it more practically next. So what I want to do is say, recap this meeting in a table, to show action items, owners and due dates, use clear language, and dot points where appropriate. So just something pretty simple like that. As we've got most of the information there already within that transcript, I don't need to go a huge amount into the pillars and the ingredients that I did earlier, because we can start to see a bit more as to what we wanted to achieve. And from here, you can start to see it does break it down pretty quickly into the action area. We're starting to see some pretty similar subheadings as what we saw in the automatic one, but it starts to become a little bit more practical in a way that we can then copy and paste that into an email or into a Teams message and start to move to that next phase. So within this meeting, pretty much everything was end of the week. I think that was the consistent language that we use. So this is spot on, but we can start to see we've got the owners automatically assigned, so making it a little bit easier to move to that next stage. But it does require us to start copy and pasting this and then doing it a bit more traditionally to get that information to the next step. So let's go across to the Copilot for M365 window and see how we can start to get that moving in a bit more of an additional fashion to that next stage of productivity. If I move over to my M365 Copilot window, I'll just do a bit of a tour around before we start to work through that Teams meeting as well, as there are quite a few sort of opportunities hiding in plain sight, which a lot of people just don't see. So some go without saying. You can start to see, you can start a new chat, you can start to search around your environment, and you can start to then work through different agents that are either pre-built, like this one that we built around the Microsoft 365 promotions, which are quite complex. We're testing it internally first off, but then you get some that are pre-built by Microsoft. So researcher to do some really in-depth, more text-based researching online, analyst, which is more focused on data, numbers, and visualizations around that, and then co-work, which I'll show a little bit more in a few moments' time as well. What's really important is having this tab at the top. If you do have a paid license today, switching between work and web. Web, as it suggests, will be using the internet as its grounding, as the resources it's going to be looking into, and work will then be looking into your M365 environment. You'll be able to access individuals in your organization, Teams meetings, chats, and files across your OneDrive and SharePoint environments as well. Where things have started to change a little bit is you can now dictate which model you want to use for the for your Copilot requests as well. So if you're just looking for quick answers, some of these qualitative ones are quite handy as far as where you want it to spend a bit more time to get the answer for you. You want some richer diagrams, for example, out of your outputs, or if you just want something really quickly, you can dictate that. But if you've got a bit more of an opinion about the model you want to use, and you're a bit more in the scene, you can start to select directly which model you want to use for this one as well. Where you can start to make things a little bit more personalized as well is you can start to look at scheduled prompts and these sort of things. But in settings, there is something quite which a lot of people have been asking for a long time, but we didn't know it existed until about 6 months ago, and it's around personalization. So this is where you can start to go to personalization, add some custom instructions, and this is where you can start to put things in like make sure you use Australian spellings instead of US spellings, which is really popular. If you really only want dot points or a certain type of language each time, so you don't have to have a prompt in a Word file to the right-hand side and keep copying and pasting it across every time you put something through, this is where you can have a really consistent approach. Something you can do to drive security at your company as well is if someone leaves their laptop open, come and put some silly custom instructions into their Copilot agent. So it always speaks to them like Yoda or something silly like that, just to make sure that people are locking their devices when they're stepping away from their desks as well. If you're looking for some scenarios, just for some inspiration, Microsoft does provide some that you can refresh to get a few more additional ones there. It always says use emojis. I would personally say take the emojis out. If you're putting them on LinkedIn, people can always smell that you put that through AI first. So take the emojis out is always my way, but each to their own there. What I want to do here, so we do have Copilot for Work open. If we're thinking about that Teams meeting that we want to work through from a little bit earlier, what I want to do is start to then think, okay, how do I create this into a report, or how do I start to then use Copilot to do some heavy lifting to augment the information within that Teams meeting? So let's say, referring to this Teams meeting, I did have this, sorry. Did have to save this one as a file a little bit earlier, just as I have did that meeting with Bo a little bit of time ago. So if it was a recent Teams meeting within the past, I think it's 90 days, then it would be fine, but I just saved it as a doc just to save a bit of time here for the purposes of the demo. So referring to this Teams meeting, create a table with action items, owners, and due dates like before. Please suggest any additional follow-up tasks to improve our plan, and call out any risks we should consider. So we'll see how we go with this one. Hopefully I've tagged the right file there, as I did save that one a little bit earlier. But what we want to see is how we can start to utilize AI to then extend what we've currently got included within the files that we have, rather than just referring to all of the information we have. These large language models are extremely advanced, so we want to see how they can start to look at best practices on the internet, do some research for us, start to bake those into the discussions that we had, to then improve and go above what we've captured within our meetings. Means that we then have more talking points, more data to refer to when we're coming back for that next meeting, so we can start to improve the cycles and the quality that we're using internally as well. So I've got the action tracker. So this is where we can start to see that it is broken down into the different rollouts, all the different captures within here. I won't focus too much on the information as it is just demo data from that conversation. But then we start to look at additional follow-up tasks that we've got through here as well. So I may have put through a different Teams meeting where it's a bit more referring to Microsoft data, but no matter. And then let's go through and just have a look at key callouts and risk mitigations and these sort of things. So this is where we start to have a look a bit more at how Microsoft has sort of captured what we've missed, or that Copilot's captured what we've missed, and started to recommend something beyond here. So what we'll do here is where I want to show, for the purposes of that, you can see how Copilot can extend beyond that Teams meeting itself. But where do we start to improve or increase the collaboration, or the speed to collaboration and accountability from here? Something which keeps a pretty low profile when Microsoft announced it is a lot of us are familiar with OneNote or with Loop. But there is a feature called Pages, which is a similar one. I imagine they're going to be consolidated at some point in the future, but it's always here down the bottom of your Copilot prompts. If you click on Pages, you can take that output from Copilot, whether it's for work or for web, and you can start to then manipulate it in here. You don't have to turn it into a Word doc. You don't have to copy and paste it across to get going before you have that end state or that final draft you want to send through. You can go through here, start deleting things, start changing the structure, and it's pretty, what you see is what you get. You can move things around pretty manually, so it's quite a rich sort of easy to use interaction. Where things become quite interesting as well is I can start to then tag in workers, so who are related here. So poor Bo, he cops it when I'm doing these demos. I have turned it off so that I don't send him any notifications as far as I do these. But if you're using it in a day-to-day scenario, you'd be able to tag in the different owners of these tasks straight away. He would then, or she would then get an email to then say, Aidan's tagged you in this document. Do you want to go across and start looking at that now? And then you might see within moments, they just jump across, their logo will appear at the top of the page, and then you'll start manipulating and getting that through there. So once you've made those changes and you're kind of like, okay, sweet, I've caught up with the team. We've made those action items. We've got the ball rolling here. Let's go and create that into a Word document. And then you can open that up in Word, and then away you go. So finally, if you think about that Teams meeting, that speed to action, and then getting it through to that final document stage, we've really started to go through some pretty rapid pace. And now we can start to utilize Copilot in Word to even work even faster, increase collaboration and that final stage too. So hopefully that shows a few of the ways that it's sort of, the opportunities are hiding in plain sight, but we're also changing our behavior ever so slightly in order to make sure that we're getting the speed to action and those productivity gains that we're all investing in AI to realize through this one-to-one Copilot scenario. I might just pause there for a second, just if Glenn or Darren, if there are any questions or anything you wanted to sort of clarify, because I just want to make sure that we're capturing that, but otherwise I'll start moving across to everyone's favorite Excel.
I think moving to the Excel part would be pretty impressive, Aidan, to show how using the power of the Copilot license here can actually help automate particular activities where things would predominantly be done manually.
Yeah.
No, that too well, because how many Excel spreadsheets do we all have in a business? Let's be honest.
Oh, totally. And this is where it's like, I think it's not necessarily the jazziest use cases we see in here, but if we think about if you've got a line of 100 pieces of data, if you share a spreadsheet with a sales team, I think everyone's seen the dog's breakfast that comes back at you, different fonts and colors and sizes and formats, and there's dates in there and all sorts of stuff that need to be manually cleaned up. So if we can get a Copilot as our friend to help speed up that formatting and consistency, it's a huge amount of ones. Even in my previous life as a digital marketer, copy and pasting things into different spreadsheets and splitting out cells and all these sort of bits and pieces because I couldn't find a way to do the formula myself, or I couldn't find someone in finance to bribe that afternoon. I've wasted hours and hours in here. So one thing I did want to show is some of the use cases around, so VLOOKUPs, HLOOKUPs, XLOOKUPs, it's always something that we always hear about. A lot of us don't know how to do them, including myself most of the time. But let's see how Copilot can start to do this, but also start to do it at a higher pace or a more advanced way than I'm definitely able to, not to speak for everyone on the call today. But what I did have, I got Copilot to make this dummy data for me. It's a great use case for Copilot too. But what we have is just some information around some company names, purchasing products with sales amounts and quantities, etc. I then have some account managers with company names with the account manager and their sales department. And then I've got department managers with their department and their assigned manager as well. What I want to do here is, I'll just be 1 second, I'll just bring up across the prompt that I want to execute. And what I want this Copilot to do is, we could probably do a VLOOKUP to do one of these at a time, but I want us to really sort of push the information that, or the action that Copilot's able to do through some of these agentic features that have been integrated, which you're able to see under the Allow Editing banner. Really what you want to do is say, allow editing, making sure that Copilot is able to make edits to your spreadsheet versus chat only or planning. It's where you're kind of using Copilot as more your advisor on how to start to get rolling or getting some observations around your data sheet. But I find it most impactful working in the Allow Editing. What I want to do is ask Copilot to add 2 new columns, one for account manager and one for department manager, to align to the company name in this data. So whilst it's a pretty simple prompt, I have given Copilot a bit of license to hopefully figure it out by itself, but I'm trying to match together the information in these 3 tabs, which if I was trying to do a VLOOKUP or something like that to bring all of these pieces of information there today, I'd probably be there all day and I'd make a bunch of mistakes and then I might give up and ask someone to help me. Let's go ahead and generate this prompt and see if Copilot's able to sort of figure that out, look at the different data tagging within these spreadsheets and start to consolidate that for us. So hopefully rolling the dice with the demo guides today, we'll see if Copilot's able to figure this one out for us. Awesome. So still working away, just finalizing some of the findings that it's done and some of the rationales. We're able to then go through and see some of the details as to what Copilot has used in order to do this. I do see some changes. Sometimes it uses a VLOOKUP, sometimes it uses an XLOOKUP, sometimes it uses some different formulas. So it's not always the same, but it generally does get the same result, which is the most important one, unless you're talking to your maths teacher back in the day where the working has to be the same every time. But let's have a look. The proof is in the pudding though. So let's see what the output is from Copilot and if it's what we wanted. So in this case, we wanted to look up the account manager and the appropriate department manager for this spreadsheet. In this case, we've got Wacky Widgets, who have an account manager of John Smith and a department manager of Alice Johnson. Let's go to our account managers. We've got Wacky Widgets, we've got John Smith. John Smith works in sales. Let's go to department managers, sales, Alice Johnson. So if we refer back and just double check that one looks like it's pretty right. We can spot check another one a little bit lower down. Let's go for Jolly Junction. Jolly Junction, Chris Lee and Bob Smith. Jolly Junction is Chris Lee. Chris Lee works in services, and services is Bob Smith as well. So if we go back to our spreadsheet, we can see that those line up pretty well, and Copilot's been able to do that for the 56 lines of data quick as a flash, which is pretty awesome. So these are some of the practical use cases that we're able to do here. One of the ones I might try and do is also just some of these manual adjustments that you can use as well. So split out into 2 columns and last name. I'll just say split out department manager. So what I want to do here, and hopefully I hadn't planned this one, but I have done it a few times previously, is I want to just double check the Copilot is able to do things like splitting these names out for columns where we're using slightly different formulas as well. Some of the scenarios that may be if there's any marketers on the call who need to put data sheet that's captured in a form at an event and we've only captured full name, for example, uploading that into a CRM system where it's first name and last name, or any of these other different scenarios where we have to split out some of that information, removing manually parts of company names that aren't appropriate to put into the CRM system as to how we store them. We can start to see how Copilot, quick as a flash as well, is able to split these things out. So once again, with a switch between VLOOKUPs, let's have a look at this one. This is using a left find and right formula, which I definitely wouldn't have known off the top of my head. And all of a sudden, within about 2 minutes, we've been able to A, figure out who the account manager, the department manager is, but then B, work to a secondary outcome as well. Maybe not that practical in this case, but we can start to see where we're going with this one as far as how we can split out information and get to that next stage where we can upload it very quickly indeed. What I want to do here, though, is because the vast majority of what I've done so far has just been this one-to-one Copilot interaction, which is great. But this is where we start to think about things like co-work, which are currently through the Frontier program. So they are going into GA, I think, in the next few weeks. I need to double check the date there, but it is coming sooner than later. It's where we can start to get a really practical way of utilizing this information, but getting to that next stage and getting Copilot to do that next stage versus us needing to think about it at every step of the way. If I click on co-work, I'll go across. These do take a little bit more time. They are pretty rich on the compute requirements in order to execute these, but I have created a few scenarios that I can walk through to sort of display how co-work has been able to do these ones as well. Something that I did have from a previous demo is I utilized like a Victoria government or business.gov employee leave policy to use Copilot to just create one for a fake company, which I creatively called Aidan's Copilot Company. It's took down like an 80-page document into about sort of 7 pages, as you can see in the bottom left hand, and that's really summarizing and personalizing into pretty clear subheadings what this leave policy should look like to give you a first draft pretty quickly. What I then did is I went into co-work, and co-work thinking about how we can start to do some of these actions, but then start to make sure that we're sending turning it into that next stage as well. I'll just put that leave policy into co-work to then create out a branded Copilot on Microsoft's Copilot palette leave policy. So I wanted to just showcase a bit around how the PowerPoint presentations have improved, but then thinking about how we can start to look at things like booking in meetings, booking in emails, and these sort of things. So just to showcase that whilst PowerPoint was one of the weaker Copilot experiences a little while ago, we can start to see that without me doing too much other than taking that Word document and asking it to create a presentation, this is what it starts to look like, a pretty clean, appropriate, professional template as well. And what you need to do, there were some tips and tricks on how to personalize this to your company branding before. These days, if you give a pretty clear PowerPoint presentation as part of the prompt, say use this template as the inspiration and the colors and fonts for the presentation, it does a really good job of extracting these. So this is where you can start to use this. And if we think about it, this is probably the only design flaw that I've seen anytime I've reviewed this one. Otherwise, it looks pretty clean. And to be honest, probably a lot better than the templates, the presentations I would have created if I was doing that manually a few months ago as well. So I did just want to show that just to kind of set the scene. But let's go look at some other ones where we're trying to create an additional step. We'll get to that next step of execution for us as well. One of the things that I've asked Copilot Co-work to do, and I'll just give it a few moments to line up, is analyzing that spreadsheet that we had from before. So this is where it's all the sales data, etc. There's a few other tabs in there as far as HR data, as far as like satisfaction level of workers, just a bunch of dummy data as far as visualizations and these sort of bits and pieces, but mostly around that sales experience. I added that into CoWork. I said, analyze this data, create a 5-page board report that's ready to highlight recent business performance, high-performing sales or departments, and call out any outliers or risks in the data. Ensure to use tables and visualizations where appropriate in order to make this document easy to read and quickly for an executive audience. Provide any relevant market data for Australia's SMBs for the past 90 days to complement the findings as well. I also asked it to send it to me via email and then set up a calendar invite for 30 minutes next week to review. So if we work through, you don't have to look at these bits and pieces too much, but you can start to see the thought process that Copilot CoWork goes through. And it's pretty rich as far as how it's starting to calculate everything, some of the proofs that it's using, some of the next steps that it's doing as well. It found the document I was referring to as crunching the numbers. It was researching the internet as far as documents to utilize as well. But most importantly, we got down to the task being completed, which was this board briefing, which I'll open in 1 second. But then it was able to send me through an email with that board briefing as well. And then it was also able to, I'll double check the date that it was able to set up a meeting. It set up a meeting for me when I ran it about this time last week on the 18th of May for 10:30 in the morning. I'll see if I can jump across and get that invite out of my calendar in 1 second. But most importantly, what did it create for us to refer through to? So this is where, and mindful, this is just me sending an Excel spreadsheet, not giving a huge amount of context as to what I wanted to do, but it's able to put together this really clean presentation of the quarterly business review, which if you enrich your prompt and make it, even run it through Copilot, ask me how to enrich my prompt is a good idea. You can start to see what it's produced here as far as really clear headline metrics, which are quite easy to read, which was one of the requests. What the board should know, some really high level dot points, including some data to prove those findings, which is always good when you're speaking to the board, but then some really clear graphs around where that monthly trend and product mix comes from. Mindful that it is demo data, so there can be some silliness in there as far as some of the values and how it looked, but if you've got a more predictable business that has a better data set that's more practical, then chances are this is going to be meaningful. But getting it so simply into this output, which is really clean to read, you wouldn't have to do too much manipulation to get to a final state that the board's able to use this. What I will do is I'll jump across to see if I can get that meeting out, mindful that it was last Monday. Awesome, I just have this one here. So this is the time that, mindful I didn't invite anyone to this meeting, it was just for myself to hold some time in here. So this is what Copilot CoWork created for me as well. So that half an hour on Monday the 18th, a walkthrough of the 5-page board briefing covering some of the main dot points. You can be more specific of what you want that agenda to include. And then it's noted that it sent me the document on the 14th, so the previous Friday when I ran that, I said last Friday when it ran that prompt originally. So you can see that just from Excel spreadsheet, created a really rich board report, sent through an email to myself, and then also sent through a calendar invite. So we're starting to go through these multi-stage processes where you're not really lifting a finger, you're just being the manager, just working with a really effective team running around and doing these tasks for you as well. So a huge amount of opportunity there. We'll jump back to CoWork to see if there's any other ones that I can sort of highlight just to see, hopefully showcase a bit around what it can do. And one of the ones that I did do previously, I ran this prompt a little while ago. I'll just wait for the information to load. But with Barath from my team, what I did is I asked to summarize all of the latest updates from Microsoft on their Copilot product launches, focusing on CoWork, turn it into a Word document that's clear and easy to read, and then set up a time for me to connect with Barath for 30 minutes tomorrow, including a brief agenda of the most recent updates. So what I'll do is I'll show the report first of all. So this is just the outline report that's got all of the information in there. But most importantly, I turned it into a Word doc so it was a little bit cleaner to read. And then we can start to see it's got that similar structure as that board report, but I've made sure Copilot is doing all of the research here. I haven't really given it any guidance other than go to the internet and find what Microsoft has announced recently. It's actually done a really good job as far as highlighting all of the key dates, some of the key sort of key product updates as well, and some of the headline scenarios that we can start to see here as well. Since I didn't give it a huge amount of information, it went a little while ago back to Ignite, which was back in November, which is a long time in AI land, but still where a lot of the announcements recently about Copilot were made. So it was still on the money as far as what I had, and then some of the pricing impacts that are coming up from Microsoft in the near future as well. But what I wanted to show here is I'll go down to the bottom. Originally, it did schedule this meeting for the 7th of May when I first ran this this process with Barath. So poor Barath, his calendar's getting a hammering for me. But then this morning, I asked to rebook this event for later this week when we both have 30 minutes free, just to see if it can do that readjustments and be more like that assistant for me. It checked my calendar for both Friday, ran into a bit of a blocker, so I reran it again just a few minutes later, and then I was able to find a slot for Barath and myself next Wednesday between 3 and 3:30 p.m. I'll bring across what that invite looked like as well, and we can start to see. So it's invited Barath to this one. We've got the time locked into the calendar, and as we can start to see, even though it's a bit of a dodgy font, I'll need to go back and have a chat to co-work about keeping it in Arial. But it has, most importantly, the agenda in here around what we're going to cover off as far as the announcements and all of the details that were within that Word doc. So setting some pretty fair expectations around the amount of content that's in that doc and how much time we need to assign over that 30-minute period to cover off all the information there as well. So we're thinking about how much information or how much activity has happened just off the back of a pretty basic prompt where I've only just said summarize a massive amount of information from Microsoft and get 30 minutes with the Barath. I think it's done a pretty stellar job there as well. So I'm mindful of time. I've got a few more here, but I don't know if we've got about 8 minutes left as well. So I want to make sure we've got some time for questions and next steps and those sort of things. But hopefully I've been able to showcase a few sort of bits of information around some of the considerations, some of the use cases around AI, just from the Copilot scenario that we may be more familiar with. But then what does the future start to look like as to how we can use these engines to be really our trustworthy AI assistant and doer and acting on our behalf to really start locking in a lot of that productivity that we really want to capture to make sure that we're getting the most out of our AI experience and protecting our businesses against some of our competitors who are going to be using AI as well, and how we can stay at the forefront and make sure we're getting the most out of it. So I might just pause there for a moment. Let pass over to Glenn or Darren if there's any questions or anything we want to cover off with the rest of the time we have.
Thanks, Aidan. I was just seeing if anyone has any questions thus far with what they've seen today, particularly from the demonstration side. Not yet, that's okay. I've got one for you, Aidan. When we talk there, Copilot co-work, are there any commercial differences to add co-work to the license? And if so, do you approximately know how much that is for the audience?
Not from the announcements currently. So if I was a betting man, I think there would be an assignment. So there won't be any additional costs for Microsoft 365 Copilot license holders. So, but I imagine there would probably be a tokenization cap or something like that in the future. That hasn't been announced, but if I was a betting man, that's where I think it would probably go. But Microsoft really wants to land and expand the Copilot usage, so I think there would be a pretty fair amount of tokens to utilize that, because you can utilize some of these features as well through a pay-as-you-go model, which for things like agents and those sort of bits and pieces. So that's where I think there'll be a line in the sand. So that's my guess, but there haven't been any hard announcements yet.
Yeah, okay. No, thank you. Because having seen the co-work a few times now, it certainly is something that, from my perspective, our perspective, is very beneficial for helping us put reports and everything together for boards and etc. Like you'll be able to show there quite quickly. Meeting requests, everything like that. Very impressive.
Yeah, actually, that reminds me. I'll share something super quick because I didn't mention around scheduling these things in as well. So I do have some prompts.
Sorry, thanks, Ryan. I know you got to jump off, mate. I just got your message. Thank you.
Awesome. No, thanks for joining.
Sorry,
No, it's all right. I just wanted to share really quickly. So one of the use cases that I mentioned at the start was sort of capturing all of the meetings or emails I haven't responded to yet from the past 24 hours. Through co-work, I schedule these prompts in every day at 8 a.m. so I can start my day and see some of those things that I may have missed or capture any of those action items that I may have missed as well. So I just wanted to make sure I mentioned the scheduling part of this as well, because that's where I see a lot of things slipping through the gaps of if I have to be the one that goes to Copilot every single time, then it's something that you can have your good days, you can have your bad days, but if you have scheduled in those core tasks, it can really fill in the gaps for you as well. So I just wanted to touch on that one quickly.
Thank you, mate. Anyone have any other questions at this point in time, team, for Aidan? If not, that's completely fine, and we can give you some further information should you wish to discuss further as to how something along these lines or this could help you and your business, particularly from an automation perspective, to try and get rid of some of those, as I call, non-value added activities that you can try and automate as much as possible. By creating an admin agent or something along those lines with the scheduling function there, that pretty keen to get my teeth into myself, I must admit. I got one last question for you, Aidan. One last question, and I know that you've done a lot of webinars, you've had a lot of meetings and everything along those lines, but are you able to share in an experience where an organisation come to you and asked you, what would you prioritise as one AI initiative to implement within the business? What would that be?
I think from sort of the good cop and bad cop side of the fence, from the good cop side of the fence, like it can go without saying a little bit, but 100% making sure that everyone is capturing where appropriate, their teams meetings, transcriptions, and turning those action items into next steps. I've been on 1,000 meetings where everyone's got to do items, and then you come back the next week and no one remembers what they were or they weren't done or both. So I think if there's any way to capture that and improve that productivity there, that's the number one. I think it's a big sort of cultural change which can then plant the seeds to then get more advanced and start to think about how we're doing this every day.
Yes.
Possibly just for another one on that one is, instead of using Google or a traditional search engine, start using Copilot as your search engine to build up that muscle too, because it really sets that foundation of becoming comfortable with it as well. But if thinking about the other half of the conversation today around the real risks associated or the real considerations is doing a bit more of an assessment around your readiness for where we are today. If you haven't considered where the organisation is, the data that you've got stored in your organisation, who has access to it, you can be surprised as to who still has access from external parties, people who've left the business, devices that you don't know about anymore, all these sort of bits and pieces which can create a bit of a risk profile too if you put AI on top of that as well. So there's some broad brush strokes where you can start to be more mature around your treatment of SharePoint sites, which sites Copilot has access to, and then you can get much more refined from there. But that would be from that side of the fence, definitely having a conversation around your AI readiness and where your data estate is up to. It's crucial.
Absolutely, no, and that's a good answer. Thank you, Aidan. Really appreciate that, because that's one of the things that we find with the AI discussion is that a lot of people want it or like it, but they don't know where to start, and that can be the most difficult part, particularly when you're about to invest in such a tool. So, but thanks again, and thank you again, Aidan, today for the webinar and conducting it. Again, I got a lot out of it. As I touched on, I'm looking forward to very much the co-work function. I'm going to find that personally extremely very beneficial, and it's going to save a hell of a lot of time for myself. And thank you to all the actual attendees today. I really hope you got something out of it. And if you have any questions or anything like that, feel free to reach out to Darren or myself. But in closing, I will hand you over to Darren. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Glenn. And Aidan, great presentation, mate. It did feel a little like drinking from a fire hose. There's a lot there. And if something has resonated, Mel will be giving people a call and be in touch shortly. If something has resonated, please give us an opportunity to come and say hello. We do have a AI readiness checklist if you wanted to go through that, short and sweet, but it really does give you an understanding of how to know what AI is in your business and look at confident adoption of what AI looks like in your business. I think that's really important. You've got the 365 license. In most cases, you have a whole lot of security that can be lit up to make your AI adoption cyber safe. I think some of the great takeaways that I got out of that today was Claude is now here, which is fantastic. Agentic AI, multi-step agentic AI is all those buzzwords. Forget that, it's just called co-work. So if you now want to do a multi-step thing, you just ask it. And the great takeaway, Aidan, is if you don't know how to do that, ask co-work, how do I do this thing? And it will write the prompt for you. That's really cool. So thank you, everyone. I've got another one coming up in 4 weeks with some other awesome AI takeaways. We'll be in touch about those shortly. Thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate it. And hope to catch you at the next one. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone. Enjoy your day.